Okay, so welcome back everybody to Regis. We're in week 7, halfway through. This is our second to last week. So today we decided to take a little bit of a detour from the regular programming that we have for you, and we decided to take a detour towards the entrepreneur side of our local community. And so I'm really excited to introduce the next speaker, Nate Fender. He's a co-founder and CEO of Ario. Ario is a local success story. It's an enterprise of augmented reality productivity, software company that increases safety and efficiency. Nate has a background in various different things, which I'm going to ask him after his talk. But he has previously worked for digital agencies Grow, Sway, and Cineva, with clients such as Google, Volkswagen, Sony, etc. And so it's a real pleasure to have Nate be here and tell us a little bit about his startup story. So thank you again, Nate, and take it away.
Great. Well, thanks, Raul. Thanks again for having me today. And I think this program is really exciting. You have put on, and it sounds like the engagement's really going well. So I'm just very grateful for being part of it. So thank you. So today I'm basically going to kind of tell you the story of our startup. We're 4 years old now, about to be 4 years old, and you know, having never started a company before, you kind of have going into something like this, you have a preconceived notion of what you think it will be based on everything you see on television or read in books or see online. And the reality of it is some of it's totally true and some of it's totally not true. And so I'm going to kind of give you the narrative of what it's been like so far and hopefully where we're going with it. And so I thanks again for letting me be here. So what is Ario? Ario, I'm going to start at the where we are right now, and then we're gonna start work our way. How do we get to where we are? So Ario is the whole premise of our company is that we have identified that in the industrial workforce, so think manufacturing or energy and utilities, there is a growing need for what the next evolution stepping stone is going to look like for the worker, the frontline workers themselves. And by that, what I mean is we're making a transition a lot of times from paper to whatever comes next. And it's happening that digital transformation is happening at the same point in time in history where these industries have big challenges that they're facing. In energy and utilities in the United States, a third of the entire workforce is eligible for retirement inside the next 5 years. So that's a really big problem because every time you lose a person to retirement or they leave their job, you're losing over 30 years of expert knowledge in that environment. And these are environments that are extremely complex. And then in manufacturing, you have between 3 and 5 million jobs in the United States unfilled. And part of that is because these jobs are becoming more sophisticated. You're working with more automation and you're working with more technology. And so individuals have to be able to understand things at a high competency. And what is challenging about that in that particular environment is that a lot of times manufacturing environments are not set up in places where it's easy to retain talent. Either you put it the factories exist in an area where there are a lot of manufacturers, so if someone feels too much pressure or stress, they can leave and go to another one, or it's put into an environment where maybe it's a smaller town and that factory supports a lot of the town, and the individuals, that is their primary source of work. And what our goal in those environments are across the board is to help empower and build confidence so that an individual can say, I might not know exactly what this knowledge is, but if I have something at my fingertips that can help me with my processes and procedures, I can start to become more confident in what I'm doing, and I can actually work at an expert level. Over time, also be building this knowledge for themselves. So what I'm going to show you real quick is kind of the products that we have, and then we're going to talk about like kind of how we got there as a company. The first one that I'm going to show you it's called Ario. name the app after it. You scan a code, and then you can document things spatially in your environment. So imagine being in a really complex environment, having things visually tagged so that an individual can show up and say, "What am I looking at?" And they can instantly get that information. And it all comes down from the cloud. And in this case, leader situation, and the individual access to regulated pull in a one-to-one 3D model. It can be interactive and it can animate, showing them how to disassemble it. And in this case, the individual says, well, when I open this, what should I expect? So someone has associated a video with this to help the individual along. So they're actually going to back out and they're going to say, okay, well, what in this environment needs inspection? So a couple of things have been tagged with needing inspection. So I see there are these two items. One is the shutoff valve. So you're going to hop into the valve and see what resources they have to help them through this process. There are a few images. There's some Internet of Things data that's streaming directly from it for the temperature and pressure readings. So they're getting information in real time about this space. And then they're going to be walked through, well, how do I actually turn the valve off? And so the company builds this task in our product and publishes it out to the user. And so we're able to walk the user through step by step. But if they have a question, they can call other people on their team and get an answer. And what makes this so special is that, unlike other video conferences such as this one, the individual is able to see their field of view and they can place into their environment spatial indicators. So the remote worker is actually guiding the individual that has a question, saying, where's the shutoff valve? Is it there? Is it on that bolt? No, it's actually over here to the left. So now that that individual knows that's exactly where the shutoff valve is, they can go, great, and they can keep going through the process they were there to do. And so that what you saw there is one of the features that this other video shows, is the remote expert piece. So we'll move through that. And I think at the end of the day, what we're really doing is trying to understand the use cases that these businesses have that really need improvement, and continue to iterate on the software as we go. But I think what we found through the entire process is something that Reid Hoffman, he was one of the co-founders of LinkedIn and now works at Greylock Partners, a venture capital firm. He describes entrepreneurship, and really this, I think this applies to anyone that's willing to take a risk on an idea, or trying to build an idea that's never existed before, or even has, or just trying to improve on it. You have to understand that the feeling that you're going to have when you're approaching this is that, one, there's going to be a risk. So that's the jumping off the cliff part. And two, you're going to have pressure. And that's the time before you hit the ground, or the time before it either flies or dies. And with that feeling, it is essentially like jumping off a cliff and trying to build something on the way down with limited resources, with limited time. And with that can come a lot of pressure. But also, with that can come this exhilarating adrenaline rush that, for me at least, has become quite addictive. That risk and that potential reward of seeing people use something that you built to improve their lives is just totally worth it. Whether it ultimately survives or not, the effort is to improve things that people are doing on a personal level. And I think when you think about technology, there are a lot of technologies that eliminate jobs and take jobs away from people. But then there are jobs that will always have to exist. And those jobs, you really want, I think we all would want, the individuals in those positions to feel very confident, very positive about the work that they do, and not overly stressed and overly pressurized. Because when you think on a personal level like that, all the way down to the unique individual, and if you're focusing at that level and you can achieve this net effect of positive outcome on a one-to-one basis in mass, then it really does affect the nature of the entire business or the enterprise itself. Because when they examine the issues that they face, it always ends up down at the personal level. So we work backwards from that into what we're doing. So as someone that has like started a company, I didn't really know that I wanted to do this. I didn't know what I wanted to do in life, actually. And for like 8 years, I thought I was just going to be in a band. And I was in a really serious music group for 8 years, and we toured. And that was through college and after college. And so therefore I just kind of bumped around and was paying bills. And I always had this mentality, you know what, I will like have a really, I'll take a job that's easy to quit just in case things take off with the band. That was my mentality for a while. And even during college, I didn't I didn't really know what I wanted. I just knew, oh, going to college is important. That's what I was told by my parents, And I think that's changing a lot depending upon what it is you study. There are so many ways to learn, but I think the one thing that I have begun to understand about myself, and I'm 35 now. It's taken me a really long time. Is that I'm really curious and interested in a lot of things, and figuring out which ones I want to focus on and continue to iterate on and continue to improve on will be the things I'm interested in most. And the things that I'm not don't get much of my attention. Um, and in college, I changed my major 5 times. I started as an information science major. I changed to communications. I changed from communications to interdisciplinary studies. I then became a music major, and then I went back to communications. So, in the end, I think a lot of those experiences kind of informed the fact that I like to experiment. I like to try different things, but in the end, um, I got a degree in a very generalized field that was more of like an examination of interpersonal communication. And that actually led me down the pathway of ultimately working in advertising because of the psychology of interpersonal communication. But the net effect of that has been a curiosity about a number of things that has really, really helped uh, with starting a company. Now, I will say the other thing that you see if you've ever seen the show Silicon Valley or a number of shows that kind of portray what it's like to build a company, um, is that a lot of times, not necessarily in Silicon Valley, but a lot of times, like as consumers, when we're using a product, we go, "Wow, this product just appeared overnight. This thing that I'm using from this company is just there overnight." When in reality, the there's so much to get to whatever it is you're touching that you don't see. And I'm sure everyone can relate to that at some point because we're all working on different things. But when you're building a company and you're focusing on iterating a product, uh, the the end goal is something you have to have this willingness to have delayed gratification, but celebrate the intermediary steps to get to. When I was in college, uh, my freshman year, they basically started ripping down the old campus and started rebuilding it anew. And one of the things that was a persistent nuisance to us students at the time was all the construction. And we referred to this big thing they put around the construction area as the big green wall. And if you go to Christopher Newport University, which is where I went to college now, you look at it, it's this pristine, amazing university, but it just wasn't that way for the period of time that I was there. And so understanding that there are these like intermediary steps to get to where you need to be is super critical. Um, I'm gonna stop real quick and ask Raul, has my presentation frozen? My video of myself seems to frozen. Can you still hear me?
No, we can hear you and see you fine.
Okay, great. It's just on my screen. I'm
Yep.
myself is frozen. I just want to double check. Um, so in 2015, myself and my wife and a friend of mine, Joe Weaver, uh, we started to have ideas around what we would build. And as a little background, my friend Joe and I went to college together. He has a degree in physics from Christopher Newport University. And he ended up working at Huntington Ingalls, which is a really large shipbuilder. And I would say probably about 10 years ago, he started working with augmented reality and virtual reality. And these were terms and technologies that really were not known very well in the public sphere at all. But he was telling me about what they were. And I at the time was starting to work in advertising agencies, on the digital side. And it became very clear that someday, we didn't know when, but someday these technologies could be very beneficial for learning and training in commercial application. And he was doing a lot of like research and studies around the efficacy of these technologies. So we said, oh, well, maybe we should build something on our own, using this kind of technology. So in 2015, the three of us, started meeting once a week at a Starbucks in Portsmouth. And, you know, what we started doing was saying, we're going to build something. We don't know what it is. So we just started meeting. We didn't really know what we were going to do. And we decided we were going to build a solar system app, and we were going to build an anatomy app. And it was going to be something people could take into their living room and see at life size, at least the anatomy portion, and just toy around with the technology and try to get an understanding of it. And this was 5 years ago. And what we realized was that you don't have to have any formality to what you're doing to begin to like experiment with an idea of where you want to go. And we just found a common place to meet, and we started doing that. And
sorry, Nate, I think I can't see you and see your video. I don't know if Scott and others can have the same issue.
Okay.
Maybe it's just me. Scott?
No, I'm here.
Can you see Nate and see the video?
No, hang tight. I see Nate again. I don't see the video. It looks like we lost the share. Can you share again, Nate? I think you're talking, Nate. I can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, I got you now.
The WebEx just crashed. Sorry about that. I don't know.
It's okay.
Technology,
It crashed
right?
me a few times. Yeah.
That's how it goes.
Okay.
So long and short of it was that. Is it sharing?
Not yet. It stopped.
Okay.
Now it is.
We're back. Okay, cool.
Now it's back.
So we're good? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, very good. Sorry about that, everybody. Technology, right? So basically, we toyed around with it for several months, and then we got busy at work again. And we said, okay, guess that's that. Work got the best of us. And then about a year later, Joe comes back to me and goes, hey, so I think I want to leave my job and I want to like really go after this. And I was at this point feeling kind of the same itch where I was. And we said, okay, what's the plan here? What are we going to build? What's the thing? We didn't know the answer to that. We just knew we wanted to use the technology, which is one of the biggest issues you're probably told very early on when you want to start a company is don't create a solution looking for a problem. Look for a problem that needs a solution. And we weren't doing that. So we learned that lesson pretty early. But what we did do that turned out well was that we knew we wanted to build something. We didn't know what exactly, but we thought we had an inclination of understanding that this needed to be in areas of work where people use their hands, in industrial environments. So for the first year, we partnered with another company. And this other company was a government contractor that had a large contract to create one-off applications using AR and VR to help solve very specific problems for equipment installation, and training and maintenance and things like that. And it gave us time and a steady paycheck to learn about the ways people would use or maybe not use this technology. So we did that for a whole year. We did that from 2016 to 2017. And during this time, we formally created our company on paper. And we had an agreement with the government contractor that if we were to build anything on our own on the side, it's ours, as long as it doesn't relate to the work that we're doing with them. And that was fine. And we built a small team around that, our separate piece of work, while we didn't have an investment or anything. So we were technically kind of like bootstrapping ourselves because we found a day job that let us build in this technology. And then we were moonlighting with our startup idea and like letting that kind of settle with us and understand which way we wanted to head with it. And during this time, from 2016 to 2017, we did our first piece of business as a startup with Dominion Energy. And again, still hadn't started building our product yet, but what we did was we built a custom application for Dominion Energy that kind of had two different things. It was to help individuals in the training environment, in the classroom scenario, understand about energized components that would be at a substation. And then also let you go out into a de-energized substation and visualize the voltage and energy fields that would be coming off, so that qualified and non-qualified workers would know how close or not close they should be standing from pieces of equipment. Oops. And let's see if I can play it back. And so basically, this is what it looked like. And we've come a long way since then, but it was one application that did these two items here. And I'm showing it to you because you'll see the difference between this and where we're at with our product. So basically, you could take this into a classroom and you'd be able to visualize what the substation looks like without going up to it. And individuals could take this home and study it on their own time. And this model scenario serves as like a menu. So an individual could tap on one of these pieces of equipment, and then they could bring it into the classroom at 1-to-1 scale and see what it looks like. Because normally you'd only be able to go out on the substation and look at it. And you could resize these to different sizing ratios. And then what you do is you then go out into the substation itself, and you check in, and then you're able to visualize based on the voltage how far you should stay away from these pieces of equipment based on whether or not you're qualified or non-qualified. And then based on where you're looking with the device, it would give you the exact readouts on all the information related to that component. And then, because this is de-energized, it would allow people to walk around in the environment, and if they breached the area they weren't supposed to, they would get a notification showing them this is what 12 feet feels like. This is what 6 feet feels like. And this gave more spatial understanding to individuals that typically were just reading these distances off of a chart. So that was a good test for us. But again, at this point, we still hadn't built anything yet. So 2018, so just 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago at this point, we started building the minimum viable product of what we have now, our platform, what you saw in the beginning. This is everyone minus myself. I took the picture. And we decided, okay, we know what we're going to build. We're going to build something that allows other people to do things, use it as a tool. We took a look at like what softwares and technologies scale or are able to grow the best. And we realized that removing the developers from the loop and allowing it to be something that anyone can use on their own would be one of the biggest, most empowering pathways to building software, selling it, and recurringly sell the subscription and sell the access to these tools to anyone who wants to use it. So we set out as a team to do this, and we landed our first commercial customer, and then we went and submitted ourselves to what's called an accelerator. An accelerator is basically a compressed amount of time that technology sometimes is made up of investors and consultants and advisors, and they basically like take your startup and you go through a process with them of mentoring, and they help you understand how to structure your business, how to go to market or begin selling and marketing, and understanding the buyer personas and the people that might want to buy your tool and software, and help you kind of round out your understanding of what it means to be a startup. And so we went through this process out in Silicon Valley. And then I moved out there for 3 months, and our team worked remotely in Virginia, and then moved back to Virginia, and we kept building off of our first customer. And the minimum viable product at this point, the concept was that we realized, what do people do in complex environments when they don't understand things? And we examined it, and it was that people would label things because they needed to know what they were. And so you see this image here with these sticky notes, and it's analog. It works. I know what these pipes go to. I know what the circuit breaker goes to in the house. Things are labeled. But beyond that, I don't really know anything else. Well, what about it? How do I use it? How do I maintain it? What if it's broken? All these other questions, none of those are addressed. So we took this concept of sticky notes, and we said, how do we take that to the next level? How do we make sticky notes a thing that can be updated remotely? How do we make sticky notes be a thing that can create a positive feedback cycle of creating and sharing expertise when and where specifically it's needed for anyone? And how do we start it in the enterprise and maybe someday bring it out into consumers and the generalized public? So we started with that concept, and that concept has grown over the last 2 years to, it's not just sticky notes, it's sticky notes that you can connect to IoT data. It's sticky notes that will deliver you on-demand processes and procedures that have analytics behind them. It's sticky notes that has courses and quizzes. And it's grown into a lot of different things, but it's all based off of this one premise that we realized was one of the biggest problems in these environments we were selling to. So with that first customer we got with our product was Canon, the camera manufacturer. And they took a really big risk on us. And I would say very early on, and even now, it's always about mitigating risk for these companies. And when you realize that one of their biggest risks is talent for themselves and their own processes and procedures, if you have something that you can offer them to solve their problem, then sometimes, and a lot of times, you're willing to take a risk on you, even if you're a small company and you're attempting to grow this into something over time. So they took a risk on us being a startup, and they still use our product to this day, and it's going very well, and they're very invested in using this technology in their manufacturing environment. And from there, we were able to build some momentum, and we were able to raise money. And typically what you do is you have to have some sort of MVP, and you have to demonstrate what's called traction, or like customer interest around your product. And once you do that, you have some sort of a pathway generally to find investors. And the idea behind getting investors is solely so that you can use that money to further grow the business. And growing the business could be, well, we have a long line of customers that are willing to pay, but we don't have the product built in the way it needs to be yet. So you take the money and use it for that. Or we have the product in a position to sell, and we have some early customer traction, but we need to market it, and we need to have a salesperson, and we need to work together on trying to sell it into the market. So you take that capital and you apply it into areas that will help grow the company. And the understanding is that you do this as quickly as you can in most cases. In our space, a sales cycle, like from the time you first talk to a potential company to when you actually sell to them, can be anywhere from 8 months to 12 or even 14 months. So it can be a very long process to actually sell to a single customer in our space. But the difference is you're working with a large business, you're not working with one person. So we raised our first amount of funding, formal round of funding last year as a Series C. We raised $2 million. And then last fall, we were reached out to by Verizon and asked to submit to this competition they were having about technologies that they would greatly benefit from 5G architecture. And so we submitted, and we gave a proposal and gave a presentation, and we ended up winning $1 million from Verizon. And the purpose was to then take our technology, work with Verizon and their 5G laboratories to test and measure the positive effects of using 5G architecture with our type of technology, and then demonstrate that using Verizon's 5G millimeter wave and things like that. So we're currently working with Verizon on that type of process, so that as 5G becomes an actual viable thing over the next handful of years, our software is a use case they're able to demonstrate. And I think we're a ways from everyone having reliable 5G in all scenarios. I don't think we're really that close to it. But businesses that do stand to benefit from 5G probably earlier than everyone else are manufacturers, because they can bring 5G in and replace the typical cable access that they have with 5G technology. So we're looking at things like that, and that's been really exciting for us. And along the way, we got a contract with the Air Force. We started growing into additional manufacturers and energy space. And with that, looking at it, mapping it out, when Joe and I, my co-founder, and I started in 2016, initially the two of us, And then we found 3 other people that was part of that team in 2017 when we started working with the government contractor, still not even having a product, still didn't even realize we would end up building a product. We weren't sure yet. But then we had 5 people that we were working with on a daily basis, and we're like, well, this is our first bit of our team. And then it was that same 3 to 5 people, the 5 of us, for the whole next year. And then in 2019, when we raised funds, we then started seeing where do we need to grow our team in order to move into the market faster and support the technology. And so in the last year, we've gone from 5 people to 15 people. And when you think from a company standpoint, in terms of culture, in terms of how you communicate, how you work together, how you coordinate all that, that's quite a shift when you go from 5 to 15. You have to make sure your processes for your company are in place in a way where you can communicate well and you're still efficient together as a group. Everyone's kind of rowing in the same direction in the boat. And then you kind of take that and then move it along with what's happened with COVID. And that has really been an interesting process. But I would say for us, since we were structured working from the cloud anyways, and we have a headquarters in Norfolk, we already had some remote employees in New Hampshire and Kentucky and Indiana. And so our work processes were already configured in a way to where we all could remotely work anyways. So when the shift happened, we were, it was a change, but it wasn't nearly as shocking to us as it probably is to other businesses. So as we continue to grow, I mean, I think we're probably going to see another probably 10 people by the end of next year, based on some of the forecasting we're seeing. Possibly, we'll see what happens. But just as you think in terms of, okay, I want to build this thing. But what you don't realize, and even if you do realize, it's one thing to think about it, it's another thing to feel it and experience it, is that your job and your responsibilities become so much more than just building the thing, building the widget. It's working with people, it's coordinating with people, it's finding ways to help build a culture that if you're gone because something happens to you, it can survive and it can thrive on its own, and you're just a piece of it. You're not running it. You're not in charge of it. Everyone is self-accountable and working together and owns their own domain. And that's what we're after as we build our culture is everyone brings something very unique and valuable to the table that's uniquely theirs. And so with that, our organization is pretty flat in that everyone is really grabbing for themselves. And of course, there are people that help organize like the different code sprints and design sprints, and, standard like work processes, but everyone is a self-starter. And I would say that in a startup environment, all of the individuals that work on our team together took some amount of risk to come work and build this thing, because one, it's a startup, and eventually we either run out of money or lose all of our customers or we're bought or whatever the end outcome becomes. All of the individuals that work on our team took a risk to be here. And I think it's because there's some underlying common theme between everyone where that's exciting. You're not always there for the outcome. You're there for the adventure of building a thing that's never been built before. And so I think you find when you try to identify individuals to join the team, you're really selling them on the sense of adventure, because every day is a little bit different. You're always going to see something new. And if you're trying to build something that's never been built before, it's totally green pasture and blue sky, and you have to think big but then act small in order to get there. And so that's what we're after, and it's very exciting. This is our current team. Actually, it's not even up to date because we've hired another person since this. So I think the senior web dev position was filled recently. So we're at 15 now. And we're all working remotely. So this is everyone on Google Hangouts in the morning. And then we have a fractional VP of sales and a CFO that helps us with our financial planning and books and everything. And so it's really gone from the days of Joe and Suze, my wife and I, to just kicking around these little app ideas to something that really has some momentum behind it, and the wheel's starting to spin, and there's a definitive focus to it. And when we're working together to try to prove out that this really does help in these environments. So now we've grown and we've started working with a number of really exciting customers in various ways across manufacturing, energy, and defense. And we have a few that we're starting to work with that I can't talk about yet, but hopefully someday I can, that are super exciting, would mean super high growth for us. And it's one of those things that when you start, you think you know where you're going, and every day it kind of like reframes a little bit of where you're going to end up. And so with that, a lot of times people build a thing, they sell a thing, it's this really nice thing. But really that pathway isn't straight. It's every day, it could be the most exciting day or the most disappointing day, or oh, why am I doing this day? Or, oh man, why don't I just have like a 9 to 5 normal job that just collecting a paycheck, and just have it standardized. But the reality of it is that if it were those things, you would probably not do it, because the element of change, the element of having to be passion driven because it's something you really believe in, is really the only thing that's going to move it down the line. It's not going to be the paycheck, albeit extremely important, obviously, for me to be able to survive and put a roof over their heads. But it has to be something that you really believe in, or on the hardest days, the days that are down here where those wiggles are on that line, you will just quit. So I think that it has to be something you really believe in that will get you through all those wiggles, to figure out where it's going to end up, which is either it survives or it doesn't. And in the end, you and everyone else together learn something very valuable about yourselves and about maybe technology, and maybe about the market you are working in. But the lesson isn't wherever the end of the arrow is. The lesson is all of that. And I think we're somewhere in the middle of that tangled mess, and always trying to straighten it out. That's what we're working for. So that's where we are right now. What's the outcome? I don't know yet. To be determined. Thanks a lot for having me, and sorry about that technical difficulty there in the beginning.
Thank you so much, Nate. So if you have time, at least I have some questions, but there's a little bit of time delay. So, and people are from different parts of the world. So if they want to have some questions, I would encourage you to send them. And if we have time, we'll read them. But I have questions for you while we get to hear what other people might have. So let me start by saying, so thanks. That was a really great presentation. And the reason why I decided to bring you in is because the way that I think about the situation that we're in, the pandemic that we're in.
Yeah.
I think all of us have been looking back at previous times in history where we had comparable pandemics, like the 1918 pandemic, the flu pandemic. Yeah. And the thing that feels really different is all the technology that we have around us, right? All the telecommunications and all these augmented, these tools that we have for interconnectivity and for us to be able to to be interacting with each other, and that seems to have alleviated it does seem to alleviate quite a bit the situation. And I thought that Ario kind of seems to be in this world, right, in this category of companies that is augmenting our reality in a way that it allows for our economy to continue to flow despite the fact that we're separated from each other. And so perhaps I would like to hear a little bit more about your thought about what is the role of Ario in the new economy, how things have shifted now in the way that you guys talk about your company compare from last year to this year. And also I would like to hear a little bit about your thoughts of where you think technology is going, not just within Ario, but where is now the technology that you guys are trying to develop? How is that now being shifted, and where you see us a few years from now?
Yeah, great questions and thoughts. I think first, what the net effect of this has been for us, and what I think it will continue to be over, the next several years at least, or until this is resolved, and definitely thereafter, is that companies, both companies that were planning on implementing technology for, even just doing what we're doing now. Some companies don't use WebEx. They don't have calls with their customers like this that meet in person. they've been forced to do stuff like this without a choice just to survive, to continue to operate. So there are those types of businesses that have been very reluctant to bring certain types of technology in. And then there are businesses that have the conversation. They're aware that they need to, and they're planning on it, but then they had to. And then there are companies that already had it, were already using it, and they're like, great, okay, I mean, this is how we work anyways. So when you have those three different kinds of companies, first, the ones that have never done it maybe realize, oh, wait, we can do this. So that's good. And it accelerates their ability to say, how can we change? The ones that were talking about it, that were planning it, are going, well, here we go. There's no time like the now time because we were planning on it. Everyone's aware we got to do it. I guess we're doing it. And the ones that were already doing it are saying, yeah, I mean, okay, that's the way we are. And obviously there's far fewer of those, the increasing numbers. But I would say the companies that sit in that middle group there that have been aware of what they needed to change and typically take longer to change just because of the organizational structure and having been forced to do this, what that does for a company like ours is, because that's kind of who we sell to. We sell to the ones that are aware, that are planning on, but maybe aren't right there yet, but are close to it. What that's done for us is we now are able to go to those companies and say, we know you're changing now. And we're already part of this conversation and we know your timeline's accelerated. Let's talk together how you're going to do that. So in some ways, our company has to approach things from an empathetic standpoint. You always need to anyways, but especially now because companies are very sensitive and the cracks of their organizational structure are more vulnerable and more exposed now than they've ever been. Any pain points that you have in your business with communication or knowledge sharing, you feel it 10 times the amount now because you can't stand closer than 6 feet to a person, without a mask on, and you can't share things that you hold at work, and you can't sit in a conference room. All of the things that were typical and taken for granted are now felt. And so the companies that were planning on changing some of those things are much more. They're doing it way more rapid than they would have been. And we're seeing that with companies we were already testing things with that as of several months ago, we're like, well, we're just going to do it. We don't have a choice. And so then we continued the test by expanding it. And with that success, measurement of is this delivering the results they want, they then go, okay, we're going to actually just take this across the whole company. So we're seeing that accelerated, compressed timeline of things they were probably already going to do. So they're just doing it now. And then for the ones on the other ends of that, I mean, there's obviously like not the mean of the two. They're doing their own things. But as far as how this will change businesses going forward and what types of technology the impact will be, I think because we're in such an extreme scenario where we work remote. That's all we do. We're never in person. It's such an extreme that I think initially, and I was reading about this yesterday, there was kind of like this disillusionment in the beginning where everyone's like, we're fine. Everyone's just as productive. Everyone's great. Why weren't we doing this all along? So now they're starting to go, okay, maybe some things are not as good as they were, right? It takes people to understand what are the things that actually suffer from it. And I think the net result will probably be some hybrid model where it's like, okay, certain companies, if someone wanted to work remotely for some companies in the past, good luck. They're so not open-minded to hearing it. Now, I think companies will be much more willing to say what positions can be remote and what positions can be partially remote, like where maybe you work from home 3 days a week and you come in for 2 days a week or an afternoon twice a week. So you still have the in-person, I call it riffing or jamming. It's like getting together and jamming, because you can move your communication faster when you're in the room sometimes and ideate. And figuring out what does the new structure look like as opposed to is it one or the other? I think we're going to see a lot, and part of those experiments will come because of obviously reducing transmission. They're going to have to either be rotating A team, B teams out in the space every other day, or they're going to have to divide up people and say, you're home for 2 weeks and you're not. And what are those things going to lead us to that then require technology to supplement those efforts? Because really, I think a business is going to say, well, what are we paying per square foot when we don't need to? Like, those are the kind of things businesses are going to start analyzing, saying, do we really need a 16-story building that we staff like 4 levels of it and rent the rest? Do we really need all of that asset? And I think that's something that happens over the next several years, but I think it's going to be a lot different. And I think that one of the other big things is taking meetings like this is so much more socially acceptable now, because it has to be. And in the future, it won't be weird, or it won't be, oh, that's not professional. It'll, a lot of companies we work now, it's pretty normal, but like a lot of companies, it's not normal. Now it's becoming normalized. You're becoming desensitized to it. So instead of getting in a plane and flying to California for a 1-hour meeting, which I've done, maybe we just hop on a video call, have the same quality conversation like this, because we've all done it 1,000 times in the last 5 months. And it's not weird, and it's not me not giving you the amount of time and face-to-face that you really want. I think there's definitely value in that, but I think it becomes a lot more socially acceptable.
Yeah, I have maybe one short follow-up, but we have a couple of questions, so I want to get to the questions. I think, so something that I realized from your talk and from your visualizations and just today is that I think it seems like the tools that you guys are developing would also be a great training tools. And in particular, I think about, for example, Jefferson Lab, which is high on the, in these 3 scenarios that you're talking about, we're high in the technology bandwagon in some sense. But when it comes to, I was talking to a colleague of mine who's an accelerator scientist. If you need to go, turn a nod or something near the physical accelerator, then it's remarkably challenging to do that and keep a distance, right? And so I could imagine something like this being, Jefferson Lab or other science labs being able to adopt technology like this to be able to train each other and communicate with each other while still maintaining a safe distance.
Yeah, I think you're right there. And from a training perspective, oftentimes the things that you create for training are then reused in terms of knowledge when you're actually doing it later on. So what we see is kind of this the spectrum of, can you create things and deploy it into a training environment and then take them and then reuse them again in production? And oftentimes the answer is yes, because you're always should be retraining yourself and the people that you work with on best practices, and getting a process in place for doing that is actually the thing that you don't see happening in a lot of cases. And this is saying, how can you introduce organizational change to say, we're going to start training this way, and then when these people finish their training, we're going to move with it into production, and new people come in and train, and then all of a sudden you're starting to introduce this new shift in how you work over time. So we're seeing that type of process unfold.
Interesting. Okay, so let me read one of the questions that we have, which is from Luis Angel Vergara Ortiz from Hidalgo, Mexico, saying, "Good afternoon. What kind of work do people do, or what kind of let me read it again. What kind of people do work to develop Ario?" Okay, I guess they're asking what kind of experts are in Ario, and the question is, it follows up with electrical engineers, computational experts, AI developers, etc.
Yep, great question. So because we're a software company, primarily the types of individuals that work in our company on the technical side are software engineers. So mainly comprised of 3 different types. Mobile software, so the native development environments for iOS and Android. So those that program in Swift or Kotlin, and then those that also are web developers. So you have front-end web developers that do all of like the UI on the front side of the content management system, and then you have like DevOps and back-end engineers that work and build our API. And then all of these technologies kind of speak together to allow you to create and publish the information out into the mobile apps. So computer science background is primarily on the technical side. As we move towards bringing more machine learning in, we'll see more of that type of position come into the fold. And then on the design side, our designers have a background in graphic design and also 3D modeling. So with like Maya, Substance Painter, CAD, and things like that, because anyone that has a UX and UI understanding that has that discipline also thinks spatially. And a lot of what we're doing is 3D and 2D back and forth, and having kind of that background is very helpful. And then the rest of our business is rounded out with marketing and sales and operation, like product manager type stuff. But from the technical side, those are the types of individuals that work with us at the moment.
Good. A quick follow-up, not to put you in the spot, but I mean, a lot of our students a lot of participants are coming from abroad. Do you guys have any opportunities for like internships or equivalent to like shadowing programs virtually or something like that?
We haven't introduced anything like that yet, but I definitely think that we will. I think that I would imagine probably a year from now is when we would first try something like that. It would have to be after our next funding round, so we make sure we have the right resources to be able to support the effort. And I would say, I think it would be awesome to do. I think one of the biggest challenges for a company of our size is being able to manage it and have it be a positive experience for the person that comes in. And I wouldn't want to introduce it if I didn't think it would be a good experience. So we definitely are all about that, and I think that we'll get to that. And I think having a partnership with you all would be ideal, because then that would be awesome.
Yeah, that sounds great. Fun. Okay, so we have a question from Chancellor Schaefer from Hampton, Virginia, asking, how do you deal with the balance between new and novel with a product idea?
I think that's a really great question. So this is my personal opinion. Everyone probably have their own thought on. My personal opinion would be the balance comes from, well, let me put it this way. When you're creating a startup, you'll often see kind of two different kinds. Those that are working on like deep tech or highly technical IP invention. You're developing a hard science, like technical thing that is not necessarily that you're going to productize, but it's something that you're trying to prove value in, that could basically be sold or licensed into other companies that they're going to implement their own product. And oftentimes those types of companies that succeed and prove the value in whatever it is they're building, the widget, a particular algorithm, a particular whatever it might be, they get acquired and they get bought into a Microsoft or one of the big ones, the Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, one of those companies. And then you have the other side of it, which is a company that, like ours, is trying to say, we're creating a new technology, but we're also trying to capture revenue around it and build a repeatable revenue source and prove that there's product market fit specifically for problems that exist. I think the balance for that type of company, because the other one is not balanced, it's super focused on a hard deep tech solution. The balance for the type of company that I just described comes based on what people will buy. And when I say what they will buy, is it actually solving a problem they have, or is it just different to be different? And if it's just different to be different, sometimes what you'll find is that's not the best way to solve the problem. It's just shiny and it's different. And we have AR, augmented reality, in our platform. I describe it, it's a feature, right? You don't have to use AR in our platform. You can use checklists, and you can use tasks, and you can use your courses and quizzes, and you can use no AR in using all those features. If you want to use AR, you can use AR. And then started the whole idea. But what we've come to realize is that it should just be a feature. AR should be something that you use when it's necessary, but not at all times just because you can. So I think the balance comes from what's for the person you're trying to solve the problem from, not what do we want to do? What do we feel good about? It should always be the most. So the balance is somewhere in there, I think.
So I know that you have to go to a panel which starts in 5 minutes. So let me ask one last question.
Sure.
You have 2 minutes for this one.
Sure.
So you mentioned that you were previously a musician, or you're still a musician, but you were in a band before. What was more terrifying, or what did scare your family more? The idea that you would be a musician, or that you'd be starting a new company on your own?
Definitely the musician thing. Sure.
Okay.
But I think it's also, and to be fair, I think it's also because they think they understood that. Because the amount of times my parents, when starting this, say, "So what is it that you are doing?" There's a lot of explaining, and even now my dad still says, "What is it that you all do again? Can you just?" Now we have videos, right? But like when we first started, it was like, imagine you just walk
Right.
into a room and then you could just see all the things you wanted to see. He's like, "Wait, what?"
Yeah.
But with the band, I think music's been around forever, so your parents kind of already have an impression of like, oh, you're gonna be in a band, you're gonna be up to no good or whatever, whatever that is. And that's not to say my parents weren't supportive; they were extremely supportive. But I
Right.
think that was much more. Wait, so how are you gonna make any money off of that? Like, how do you pay rent with a band? With a business, I think they were much more like, oh, okay, I can see how this could be really useful.
Okay, interesting. Well, I think Nate, I mean, I have much more questions for you, but I think perhaps we should cut it there since you do have to go to the next session. Thank you so much for
Yeah,
taking your time to join us. And let me just remind everybody, so we're going to have a panel of local entrepreneurs, and this is about to start in 3 minutes. So I would encourage you to go check that out. And so you're going to see different local entrepreneurs and get to hear a little bit more about their stories. So once again, thank you so much, Nate.
Great, thank you all. Bye bye.
All right.